Well, welcome to Field Notes, the monthly podcast of modern steel construction, the monthly magazine of AISC. I'm your host, Jeff Weisenberger, editor and publisher of Modern Steel Construction. And this month's guest is Stephen Fenves, a longtime AISC volunteer. He's been an active member of the AISC Committee on Specifications for several years, including serving as chair of the Editorial Task Committee, and we'll get into that a little bit more specifically in a minute here. He received not only his bachelor's and master's degrees, but also his PhD from the University of Illinois. He taught at the University of Illinois for several years. He also taught at Carnegie Mellon University and worked with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, also known as NIST. Welcome, Steve. It's really a pleasure to talk to you today.
I'm glad to be here.
You know, you've obviously had a long career in the industry. So I'm curious, what got you interested in engineering in the first place?
I was interested in art and architecture from very early days. My mother was a graphic artist, and she influenced me greatly. I was also interested in math and physics in high school. So on the basis of a couple of books, particularly a catalog of an exhibition in the New York Museum of Modern Art, this is presenting bridges as architecture, as art, influenced me to go into civil engineering. My intention was to become a bridge designer, design sleek bridges like Ammon had done. I got derailed in my first year at graduate school into another direction. Eventually, I became a community assisting the community in transitioning from the slide rule age to the computer age. And that's the route in which I got into connection with AISC. A lot of people ask me on the committee and elsewhere, what do I do? What am I doing on that committee? I'm not a steel person. I'm not a member of AISC, but they became deeply involved. So I'd like to, one other brief item about my background. I'm a Holocaust survivor. In my 13th year, I was in 2 ghettos and 3 concentration camps, in 2 railroad transports, in locked boxcars with no food, no drink, no sanitation for days after days. Building Messerschmitt airplanes, and eventually in a death march that ended in Buchenwald, where I was liberated, where I spent 1 day before the liberation. I returned back to Yugoslavia, which by then was a workers' paradise, and on strictly Soviet lines. I was told that because of what I suffered, I would be allowed to complete academic high school, but under no condition would I be accepted in any university in the country, because I was not the son of a proletarian. I was a son of bourgeois, and universities were open only to sons and daughters of proletarians, workers. So on that basis, my sister and I and 2 of our cousins escaped, wound up in France, spent 3 years in France, finished my high school, and before we came to the States. I was greeted by a lot of people who had known my parents. I was also very warmly greeted by the Selective Service, and I was drafted a year and a half after I came in the States, drafted in the U.S. Army, sent back to Europe, sent back to Germany, which was an interesting experience. But I got the GI Bill out of it, and on the basis of the GI Bill, I could support myself and go full-time to university and get my 3 degrees. So that's how I got to the point where we're talking about. Uh, I had a very successful, great success very early in my professional life. Three of my colleagues at MIT and I developed a uh, program for structural analysis that included all framed types that had a communication language at the level of the engineer rather than putting in code numbers that you forgot as soon as you typed them in. And that created quite a change. Uh, the term killer app was not yet known, but I think we wrote the first killer app in civil engineering in the sense that companies and highway departments were buying the computer hardware just so that they could run stress on it for structural analysis. So I also became secretary of the uh, newly formed Committee on Electronic Computation, still as an undergraduate, and got to know all of the leading uh, industrial people who were starting their companies this route, and certainly all the academics who were devoting increasing attention to this route. With that background, I started teaching a course on computer methods uh, while still a graduate student. Some of the European students didn't quite like that, but I did it anyhow. And I was very busy collecting material for my book, and that's where the story starts. In the collection, I found articles on what at that time was called decision logic tables, a way of uh, tabulating if-then type logic statements in a organized manner. And I did a paper for the third AISC computer conference describing the method, illustrating it with some engineering calculations, and then I took a piece of the structural design specification. If the section is compact and the limit state is bending, then the nominal strength is such and such. That's essentially the format of all of the specification. A bunch of conditions, combinations of which yield outcomes. And I wrote that paper and illustrated it and showed that when you tabulate that on a table, a lot of the entries are blank. And I asked the question, what does that mean? Is that a logical impossibility? Or is it something not done in practice and therefore to be avoided? Or is it a particular combination that the committee as a whole simply forgot about? And I left it at that. Shortly after the publication, I got a call from the director of research at the AISC in New York at that time. Would I come to a meeting where companies will present proposals to computerize the AISC specification? This is early 60s. Okay. So I went and wrote a critique saying all of these people will be incorporating individual interpretations of that of the spec, buried deeply in the code. Neither AISC nor the individual user will ever be able to find out what assumptions have been built into it. And I suggested an alternate approach, namely tabulate all of these decision points and let each programmer pick whatever part they want.
It's quite a story of how you got from where you were to where you are now. And I mean, a lot of people have had very difficult, very challenging, very winding paths to get to where they are, but yours is one of the most interesting I've heard. And one thing that just stuck out from right when you were talking at the very beginning is the fact that a lot of people get into engineering based on kind of more just the basics, like they played with erector sets or Legos or what have you. You came into it from the artistic side, which is an interesting take on things. Then you've been in the industry for a very long time, Steve. Obviously, you've been an AISC volunteer for a while, and I know you were as you said you've seen the transition over the years of going from the slide rule age to the computer age. Thinking from your teaching role for a second here, moving forward, what do you think is the most important thing or most important message that you put out there for the next generation of designers?
Well, I think the most important thing to instill in the young people is ambition. I don't think we do enough. They come in expecting to become engineers, and we train them to be good technicians. And we sort of sit on them. It's not general, but it's the majority, to instill good, saleable skills that lead to a good first job.
Mm-hmm.
I have always maintained to the students that changing jobs is a very important ingredient in the career of people, particularly in civil engineering, moving from a field job to an office job, etc. I didn't do it, but I always encourage the students to do that. That's number one. With that goes the training, the indoctrination to think of higher principles, sustainability, energy conservation, environmental sanity, maintenance, etc. And it's hard on introductory courses, but it's important as wherever possible to begin to introduce these considerations that used to be external, totally external when I was an undergraduate student, and now are becoming the key issues and not
Sure.
the technical issues of what wide flange, what 14 wide flange to use for this column. That's no longer a very difficult decision to make.
No, I think it's a very good point. I think there's a lot more considerations now that need to be taken when designing buildings for whether you're an engineer, you're an architect, anything. But yeah, I think what you're saying is like the position is elevated beyond simply understanding physics and understanding structural engineering and putting together frames. There's a lot more to consider now,
Right.
which is good.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure. And then speaking of the next generation, I do want to take a minute and just recognize a new scholarship that is named in your honor in 2023, thanks to a $50,000 anonymous donation to the AISC Education Foundation. We are now awarding a new scholarship, the Stephen J. Fenves Scholarship. And in late 2023, AISC sought $50,000 in additional matching donations in order to establish a permanent annual $5,000 scholarship in your name. If you don't mind, I would like to just talk a little bit about that. First of all, what does the scholarship mean to you as far, it's something that was put together in your name?
Well, again, working back from my own case, my career was immensely accelerated by the Tau Beta Pi fellowship I got for my first year of graduate study. I could take a full load of courses and prepare for the rest, as opposed to immediately accepting a research assistantship, which reduces to 2 the number of courses you can take in a semester. I cannot, well, I can show you charts, progression charts of where I got, how far I got when, as opposed to the classmates who started at the same time, except took 3 years to catch up in coursework with what I could do the first year. That's number one. Number two, I feel great sympathy for these kids who are have to take out loans, who have to start the most forward-looking years of their life under this weight of this debt that they are signing up at the same time. It must be a terrible, terrible feeling. Fortunately, my wife and I managed with 4 children not to have to depend on that. And any family who can do that deserves credit. So the fellowship is of immediate, enormous help to young people to free themselves from these very trying constraints and concentrate on doing what they want to do. That's the depth to which they can go, etc. That doesn't matter as much as the freedom, the lack of fetters that they accrue by a fellowship. That's why I feel that's why I feel honored that this fellowship was established. That's why I feel envious of the young people who get it, because it is really a accelerated path to their future that they wouldn't have otherwise.
No, I think it's a wonderful honor, and it's going to do a lot of good, and it's excellent that it's been named after you. I want to go back quickly. You mentioned, you talked about being a Holocaust survivor, and I understand you dedicated a great deal of your time speaking about that experience. I know you did an interview, I believe it was with Wolf Blitzer on CNN, and then other interviews as well. On that note, given your experience and maybe in the context of this scholarship, what does the concept of giving back mean to you?
I think that every person has a great deal of responsibility to every other person. And whatever good has been bestowed on you, it is, I think, an obligation to attempt to return multifold that good to others. I can't always do it. My will provide some of my returns, but I certainly cannot multiply bestow what Tau Beta Pi had given me, what the Jewish distribution committee did, supporting me as a refugee and stateless person for years. But I do my best. It's a very important aspect. It's a calibration of your debts and commitment to humanity on how you respond to the gifts that you have received. So it's at least in my mind and in the mind of many of the survivors I know, a very important question of do I do enough in return? And we all try to live by that.
That's a perfect answer. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. So what do you consider to be your legacy, either professionally or in life in general? Or what do you want it to be?
Well, they're two different. You were too young to have known Ivan Viest. He was a professor at Illinois later, for many years with Bethlehem Steel. His contribution to the spec is much larger than mine because he single-handed initiated composite construction, the consideration of composite construction. At a dinner, he sent me the little note and said, "Here is the epitaph for your tombstone." It said, "He eliminated the cost of design as a consideration in making design decisions," which in crass commercial terms is a very important statement.
Mm-hmm.
Analysis used to be the millstone. Some of you may have read about the Quebec Bridge collapse, where the bridge was widened, extended in length, loads increased. They did not have the time or money to recompute the stresses and resize the members. And halfway through the construction of the cantilever arms, the whole thing collapsed. 70 or I don't know how many people died, et cetera, et cetera. That was not uncommon. Maybe that was a stark example, but can we afford to reanalyze? Can we afford to analyze it all and just depend on our sense of how the structure undulates? That was a burning question in any designer's mind. I can't say that I eliminated it, but certainly cheap computing eliminated it. So that's one measure. I think I have contributed greatly to not just maintain, but enhance the dignity of structural engineering by sweeping out stupid detailed computations as a criterion for performance as a structural engineer, and allowing people to move up. That's my professional sense. Personal sense is entirely different. There's no question my 4 children are the greatest things that I produced. And it goes on to the next generation. After the events of the last few weeks in Gaza and Israel, three of the oldest among the 7 grandchildren wrote me fantastic letters on how they feel as the obligation they feel as grandchildren of a survivor. That was very moving.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, especially like you said, in light of recent events. I do have to ask a question now. Of your 4 kids, have any of them decided to become engineers too?
Gregory Fenves went as far as the head of the Department of Civil Engineering at UC Berkeley.
Oh, wow.
When he accepted the position as Dean of Engineering at University of Texas, rising to the president of UT, moving over as president of Emory. At his inaugural installation at UT, both I and my younger son, who is a professor at Northwestern, were in robes with the academic procession, and Gregory said that my father still doesn't understand where I went wrong in giving up the comfortable job of being a professor of civil engineering and taking on the thankless job of worrying about the football team's performance, etc. So I lots of people ask, did you influence your son? I said, no. Not my wife nor I did not influence our children into anything. Mm-hmm. We attempted to provide an environment where they could find themselves, and define themselves, and choose whatever path they thought was appropriate for them. And I'm very proud of that.
You should be. I think that's the best approach too. It was really fascinating to chat with you.
Thank you.